Man, I don't even know what to say at this point. I mean, first of all, can the Bulls get any more unlucky with another player going down right at the beginning of the game? Although this time it was considerably worse because it was one of our best players in Zach Lavine. Obviously, we're all crossing our fingers hoping that everything is okay with Lavine and that he just tweaked it and will be able to come out for tomorrow's game against the Celtics. The good news is he was able to walk off of the court on his own, unlike what would happen with Derrick Jones Jr. the other night against the Nets, but that's a huge blow to the team and their morale when something like that happens so early in the game unexpectedly. I don't care if you're going against the Warriors without Draymond and Klay Thompson, that hits you hard mentally knowing that Lavine isn't going to return and also uncertain what that injury means for the long term. So that's going to be a big factor for why the Bulls showed up the way they did tonight, but come on now. This was a pretty inexcusable performance from the Bulls tonight. But it's one thing to get blown out by the Nets and their big three in a back-to-back game, but after getting smacked and embarrassed on national TV, you would think that would be a slap to the face where you'd wake up and get motivated to come out and play hard the next game. I know it's rough seeing Lavine go down early, but where was the effort? Where was the grit? These guys didn't look like they wanted to be there tonight. They would turn the ball over, and when that in and of itself happened way too much, but then they wouldn't hustle back and try to defend after doing so. They didn't defend the perimeter for a team that is one of the best perimeter scoring teams in the league, and they got out hustled in the paint, which is unacceptable when they're a small team. They didn't even have Draymond Green tonight. The Bulls made Andrew Wiggins look like a superstar out there in the first half. Steph didn't even have that great of a game compared to what we saw the last time around when the Bulls played the Warriors. The Warriors were scrappy, they wanted it more after getting embarrassed last night against the Bucks. Like, that's how good teams respond to a bad loss. You come out fighting the next game, period. Now, I mentioned this in my last post-game video after the loss to the Nets, and I may have to make a separate video on this topic, and that's how the Bulls have shown up against these best teams in the NBA. Because this now is the second time the Bulls have gotten blown out badly by the Warriors. We haven't even faced the Bucks yet, we will next week. We've already lost twice to the Heat. Same with the Sixers, we lost twice to them as well, and they were shorthanded, as a matter of fact. We haven't seen the Suns, and it's a concern when you talk about being a contending team and you're not able to even remain competitive against some of these strong teams in the NBA. But anyway, though, about this game, I mean, what more is there to say than just a continuation of what we saw in the second half against the Nets? The Bulls couldn't score to save their lives. There was minimal effort on both ends of the floor. They were turning the ball over like crazy. They were letting the Warriors hit everything from deep. They weren't boxing out on rebounds. Also, why were the Bulls settling for so many three-point shots rather than just trying to set up plays? Oh, and don't even get me started on the ball movement, which was non-existent because most passes turned into turnovers. But look, I'm not going to sit here and belabor the point of how bad the Bulls played tonight. We all know they played poorly. It was an awful game, an awful way to show up after another embarrassing loss. But really, as Bulls fans, what we have to be thinking about is Zach Lavine and just praying that everything is going to be okay and that this was a minor tweak that won't sideline him, or if it does, at least just sideline him for a minimal amount of time. Because as much as people have been talking about how great DeMar DeRozan has been this season, this team will not do well without Lavine. Plain and simple, which I know some people will say, well, that's a given, but it's the reality of the situation that the Bulls could fall quite a bit in the standings if Lavine has to miss significant time. Yes, they're still first place in the East right now, even after tonight's loss, which is why it's great the Bulls started off the season so strong, winning so many games to give them a bit of cushion. But man, going into these next few games, playing against teams above 500 and on the road, if you're not doing it without Lavine, you're going to see a pretty sizable losing stretch over these next couple weeks, especially while Derrick Jones Jr., Caruso, and Javonte Green also all remain out. So I'm not going to sit here and go through the box score. I don't know about you guys, but I sure as hell don't care to reiterate how bad this game was from a stats perspective. And I think a lot of Bulls fans just want to know or explain or an explanation of what has been happening in these last few games with the Bulls. Well, aside from the lack of effort that I talked about, the inordinate amount of turnovers, above all, it's really been the defense. The defense has not been the same, and that's mainly because their best defenders are out. Like, if anything, this stretch has shown just how impactful a guy like Alex Caruso has been for the Bulls. The Bulls were top 10 in defense in the league prior to Caruso getting injured, and since he's been out, they have fallen to the bottom 10 in defense. And it's not just Caruso, because I don't want people to think that the Bulls defense has gone by the wayside all because of Caruso. No, Javonte Green and Derrick Jones Jr. have been big defensive players this season for this team. You talk about a guy like Javonte Green who understands his role, hustles on both ends of the floor, plays with that scrappiness and energy that gets the team going. That is critical to this team's effort on the defensive end. And when you're going against the top 5 teams in the offensive rating like the Warriors and Nets are, you're going to get torched without playing high-level defense. All that being said, though, it's still no excuse. Like, even without Caruso, Derrick Jones Jr., and Javonte, which, by the way, I should add Patrick Williams to that as well. He's one of the other better defenders on this team. Even without those guys, that's still no excuse for the Bulls' lack of effort on the defensive end. You've had guys standing around watching the ball, not providing help defense, not reading screens, missing assignments off of the ball, getting worked on the ball. Like, I know some of these guys aren't the best defenders, but the least you can do is try. Try and play the best defense possible, knowing you're without some of your best defenders, and not just rely on your offensive game, because just winning in a shootout will work against a team like the Pistons, but it's not going to work against the best offensive teams in the game. Like, even in that Pistons game, the Bulls actually still played pretty poorly on the defensive end. It's just the Pistons weren't hitting open shots because they're the Pistons. Also helped that the Bulls were making all of their shots. So anyway, to be honest, I don't know what to expect for tomorrow's game. We did get word that Zach Lavine will have an MRI tomorrow morning on that knee that he injured, just hoping nothing serious comes back on the results of that MRI. But even if Zach is fine, I have a hard time believing he'll be available for tomorrow's game, given the team is likely going to be traveling out to Boston first thing, and we likely won't know the results of Lavine's MRI until later, which means he probably won't even travel with the team while he gets his MRI in Chicago. But all of that aside, the Bulls are still going to be without Caruso, Javonte, and Derrick Jones Jr. for the next few games. And guys have to step up on the defensive end if they even want to remain competitive against these teams in their upcoming games. Going against the Celtics, the Grizzlies, Cavs, the Bucks, like, forget winning. I'm talking about even remaining competitive against these teams if we see the same effort we saw in these last 2 games on defense. Lonzo Ball, who's been playing pretty average these past few games, he's actually even been slipping on defense as well. The guy's not looked as engaged on that end of the floor like we saw to start this season, and he's been turning the ball over like crazy, like especially if Lavine is out for a period of time. Lonzo has to step up on both ends of the floor. He's got to be more aggressive in driving to the basket than just settling for outside shots. And he has to defend the perimeter better. Teams have been lighting us up from behind the arc, and part of that is on Lonzo. Anyway, to be honest, I'm a little too annoyed to talk about this game further, but I had to come out and vent a little, and I'm always going to do a post-game video, even if it's a terrible game. I'll be back tomorrow for the game against the Celtics. I just pray we see a better game from this team. Hey, it's not going to be nationally televised, so maybe that will help. Anyway, guys, as always, be sure to subscribe if you're a Bulls fan, as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.